All right, Abby, you may start the timer. Thank you.
I will not be restarting the timer.
Very good. Very good. Good morning, everyone. My name is Brandon Johannes. You may recognize me from such classes as this one. Oh, well, some of you also may recognize me from other classes as well, but that's beside the point. So, my assigned country for this cultural pocket guide was India. Very similar to the other two countries we've already seen so far. It is on the Asian continent. It's actually referred to as the Indian subcontinent. It's in southern Asia, bordered on one side by Pakistan, and I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. This very first image I have up here is just a really quick collage, though, of just a few snippets of images from India, including a woman in traditional dress, some images of some Hindu gods, as well as the Taj Mahal. So to begin, just some really basic information on India. First off, India is has the second largest population of any country in the world. Over 1.2 billion people live in India. That is, again, the second highest in the entire world, behind only China, which borders it to the east. Its government is a federal republic. It is very similar in design to our government in that it does have three branches: executive, legislative, and judicial. Something that I found interesting, though, in there, if anyone's familiar with our government, like our Supreme Court, for example, we have 9 justices on the Supreme Court, whereas the Supreme Court of India has 1 Chief Justice and 25 Associate Justices. I think just by virtue of the fact that I'm used to having so few that seem to not always get things right sometimes, it seems like 25 would be nigh impossible to achieve much. Its capital is New Delhi, which is also one of its larger cities. Its date of independence is the 15th of August, 1947. I'll talk about that independence date a little bit here in just a minute. Some of the religions practiced in the country include Hinduism, which is the majority religion at 80.5%, followed up by Muslims, some Christians, and some Sikhs, and then finally other or unidentified. Here is an image of India's flag. The top field, deep saffron, the bottom green, the center white. At the center, we see an image of, and forgive me if I mangle any of these pronunciations, the Asoka Chakra. This is a representation of the beliefs and teachings, as from what I read, of the Buddha. Now then, its cultural history at a glance. India is a very aged, rich culture. It has been around. The earliest populations of India date back to the second and 3rd centuries BC. If anyone's ever studied any history, this was the beginning of the Indus Valley people in the 2nd or 3rd century BC. It is Indian culture is very collectivistic, very group-oriented, and very focused on the family. There's also a very hierarchical society. India's people are known worldwide to be very welcoming, very friendly, and very opening. Something interesting that I read in some of my research was that Indian people oftentimes hate to say no. They hate to use the word no, particularly in either common conversation or if someone is making a request of them, they will go out of their way to say no, even if the answer is negative. From what I read, they will go out of the way to try to find some positive way to either at least answer or try to accommodate what is being asked of them. I thought that was very interesting and somewhat refreshing. Speaking of culture, we talked briefly about the work of Geert Hofstede in class the other day, and this is something that I'm familiar with because I've had the intercultural communications class. I think this is a really good indicator of the culture. First off, on the power distance dimension, they scored relatively high. All of these scores are out of 100. 100 being the highest, 0 being the lowest. Power distance, very high. There is, again, a very hierarchical aspect to Indian culture, including, and this is something I was going to mention later, but I can talk about it here because it is important in the power distance aspect. India still employs a caste system. even to this day. So, meaning what we might consider subcultures or co-cultures or even individual ethnicities, they have social stratification, wherein a particular caste performs certain tasks, maintains certain beliefs, does not perform other tasks, does not communicate or associate with perhaps other castes. Some castes, the lower castes, are even considered to be at times unclean or untouchable. That kind of social stratification means that there is almost no social mobility. You usually don't marry between castes. You cannot, again, the caste you're born into is a caste you're in the rest of your life. Part of my research also indicated, and I thought this was very interesting, what we refer to as suspect classes in the United States, i.e. minorities or other groups that might be underprivileged. That power distance aspect, that's how a lot of some of the lower castes are dealt with in India today. A lot of social programs, for example, social welfare programs are directed or dedicated to those lower castes. So I thought that was very interesting. Again, very low on the individualism, again, very collective, very family-oriented, group-oriented, relatively masculine, competitive, not very aggressive, but more masculine. And again, or finally, low on uncertainty and avoidance. They're okay with ambiguity. They are patient, they are laid back, things can take time. They do not mind the ambiguity. Some of the rituals and or festivals that I looked into as part of the research here, wedding rituals are very involved. Beginning days before the actual wedding itself, with prayer and celebration, leading to then the actual final day, which includes the wedding itself, surrounded by family, very formal. This is a time where you will definitely see formal dress, for example. The weddings oftentimes marriages are arranged, sometimes in the youth, as young as childhood. Marriages are arranged by the parents. So not a lot of, again, back to that social stratification, not a lot of choice there. Funeral rituals, again, they look at a funeral ritual by and large as aiding a soul's voyage from this world to the next. And so several days of celebration and mourning mixed with celebration. So I thought that was very interesting. I liked that compared to how we just have a funeral and we're done. I like days of celebration. This is a picture of a wedding, of a traditional Hindu wedding, which I think is very casual dress is very plain, very 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 understated. Whereas during formal occasions and celebrations, they go all out. They dress very very colorfully, and women wear gowns of beautiful silk, replete with color, and just long flowing gowns. I love that dichotomy there between very understated most of the time, but then for festivals and celebrations, they go all out. A couple of other festivals that I chose to focus on. One was the Holi Festival. This was celebrated at on campus this past spring. The Holi Festival is a celebration of the triumph of good over bad, and is celebrated by people coming together, celebrating, praying. It also involves a lot of color. So if you saw people running around on campus this past spring just full of color, it wasn't because necessarily the color run, it was because they had been celebrating the Holi Festival. People throw colored powders at each other and basically decorate each other with those colored powders. Another one that I found interesting, because I have several siblings, and again, if I mangle this pronunciation, I apologize, the Karthigai Deepam Festival, which is a festival of lights, wherein sisters will pray for brothers, and then brothers in turn pledge to protect their sisters throughout their lives. And so I'm very close with my siblings, and so I chose to focus on that one. Oftentimes, oil lamps will be lit and just fill a house with oil lamps. Really briefly, this is an image on this side. This is an image here of children celebrating the Holi Festival, and the other image is of oil lamps for the Karthigai Festival. Finally, some issues facing India. Number one, inequality is very major. Women are treated oftentimes as a second-class citizen. Some 50% of women in the country aren't even literate. Education is reserved not only for those with money, but primarily for males. if you are not someone who has money, you are extremely poor. Poverty is very widespread and very crippling, especially in rural areas. Along with that, the Indian government is known for a great deal of corruption. Bribery is widespread. If you want to get something done, a lot of times it's believed you have to go and bribe your local official to get that done. Finally, kind of sewing all that together, the infrastructure, along with the high poverty and the corruption. Infrastructure is a big problem. Water resources are tainted, for example. People live in very, very poor surroundings. Unless there's someone who is lucky enough to be involved with business or industry. So that is what I have for you today. Do you have any questions of me? No? Good. No questions?
So what type of government do they have?
They have there is a federal republic very similar to ours. Again, they have an executive, a legislative, and a judicial, very similar to ours.
It's pretty good. Yeah.
AJ.
I understand that India actually has a very sizable military as well, and with them bordering areas that have a lot of proxy wars going on right now, how is that affecting their basically political institution?
That is a really good question, and that really is a big problem. Just like Pakistan, India is in nuclear power, and this is a grave concern because while India wouldn't necessarily be described as a belligerent, it is definitely, India has been at odds with Pakistan for a long time. Particularly, for example, over land, the Kashmir region, for example, is hotly disputed between India and Pakistan. So it is a major concern. Along the border as well, terrorism is a concern. Terrorism in the country as a whole is not a major issue, but along the border with Pakistan, terrorism is a major concern. Sorry.
Because the population is so high, are they doing anything in terms of birth control to slow it down, the rate of it?
That is a good question, and something that I originally was going to directly address. They're discouraged from having many children, but something that unfortunately a couple of different items along with the growing population that have become a concern. One is infanticide. Some regions, some families practice infanticide, particularly on female newborns. Tied in with that later on, again, with the treatment of women, growing population and poverty. Sometimes if a woman's family cannot provide a significant or sufficient dowry, then they participate in what is called bride burning. The bride will be put to death, be burned alive, if they simply cannot meet what is expected of them by the groom's family. So yeah.
So high disease rates?
Yes, there is a high disease rate, particularly with bacterial infections. Again, because of the living conditions. For example, a large majority of people rely on the Ganges River as a source of water. The Ganges is polluted and full of disease, and because they live in poverty and in rural areas, there is no water purification available to them. So that is definitely, according to the CIA's website, that's a travel concern for Americans, for example, traveling to India, is that disease is a concern, absolutely. Again, overpopulation and poverty, lack of infrastructure, disease is going to take a hold. Anyone else? Thank you.